Thank you for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. Make sure to follow us on social media and check out the many other videos on this channel about working with and advising student organizations. And now, please enjoy your workshop.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Katie Stiles. I serve as the Assistant Director for Registered Student Organizations at Loyola Marymount University. As the next couple of slides will tell a little bit more. This semester, LMU has been completely remote. All classes, all activities, no in-person events have been permitted for student organizations on or off campus. So out of that decision that was made over the summer, we crafted an entire plan that not only engaged our student organization officers, but also our new first year students and transfer students. And so this presentation will provide information and just go into a little bit of detail about what those initiatives were, how they panned out, and what we're looking to do for doing it for the coming semester for spring. So just to provide a little bit of an overview of everything we're going to cover today. First, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about LMU and Student Leadership Development, which is my department. I'm then going to go into what our outcomes were within this plan. I felt like there were a lot of moving targets to hit, so kind of knowing what was the goal, what was essentially the prize was made it easier for us to keep our eyes on it. I'm then going to go into more detail about all the different programs and initiatives that we did, which includes a website, some virtual fairs, some programming that our student organizations did, a stagnant quiz, and then we're going to start to wrap up and talk about marketing assessment, where we're going from here, and then my contact information at the end. So let me tell you all a little bit about LMU. LMU is it's a Jesuit university. We're located in Los Angeles, California. Here's some pictures of campus. I'm very nostalgic looking at these as I haven't worked on campus since March. I haven't been there in months. So it's just really nice to see some pictures of campus. We have about 7,000 undergraduate students that are enrolled in a little over 200 registered student organizations. So that's a little bit about LMU. Student Leadership and Development is the department that I work within. As I mentioned, we have slightly over 200 registered student organizations. All student organizations at LMU are required to have a full-time and exempt faculty or staff advisors. That's something that comes up a lot, so I thought that would be important to know as we go into the rest of the presentation. Within Student Leadership and Development, we have a couple other functional areas. Alongside our RSOs, we have ASLMU, which is our associate students of Loyola Marymount University, which is our undergraduate student body, and then GSLMU, our graduate students of Loyola Marymount University, which is our graduate student government, as you probably could have guessed. We also have sorority and fraternity life, which is vernacularly referred to as SFL. We also, within the Department of Student Leadership Development, is also the Ignatian Leadership Institute, which is a collaboration between the School of Education and the Division of Student Affairs. It is a series of 3 one-unit leadership classes based all around the social change model of leadership development. I'm an instructor within the Ignatian Leadership Institute, so if you have questions about that, definitely grab my email at the end and let's continue that conversation offline. Finally, Main Entertainment, which is our main programming board on campus, is also housed within Student Leadership and Development. Also, something to know, it's going to come up a couple times throughout the remainder of this presentation. We use Leo, or we use Engage, pardon me, we use Engage. It's branded as Leo. That's what we call it. We migrated from OrgSync to Engage last December. I think it was actually December 12th. So we're almost at that 1 year mark. And previous to that, we had been using OrgSync for maybe 4 or 5 years. So a lot of these resources that I'm going to outline in a couple of slides are housed on Leo. So if you're an Engage user, they'll look familiar to you, but I think there are some ways that a lot of those things could transfer to other programs such as campus groups, Presence and Volvio, etc. So to tell you a little bit about the outcomes for this virtual engagement plan, this Get Involved at LMU initiative, this campaign. We called it all of those things, and then probably a little bit more. Essentially, when we took a look at everything, we did a bunch of best practices research, institutional research. And when we kind of did all that research and we said, okay, where's going to be best for us to go? What is really what we're wanting to do with the like 6 weeks that we have to really put something together and launch it. And out of all that research, we developed these 3 outcomes as a way to really not only center ourselves, but just kind of keep ourselves organized of, okay, what's the bigger why here? The first was to educate students, especially first year students and transfer students, on the variety of campus involvement opportunities. So a lot of these things were open to all, but the target audience was definitely our first time Lions on campus, our first year students and our transfer students. Our second outcome within this campaign was to engage with students across various virtual platforms. So yes, we have Leo, and that's great, and we have Zoom. But what are some of those? What are some of those other ways that we can really meet students where they are and engage with them? Be it social media or other programming sites, or maybe some programming sites that are more passive. So that was also kind of a focal point for us in this campaign. And then the third piece, which is actually centered on the student leader experience, was to provide resources, support, and other unique ways for student leaders to provide meaningful experiences. In other words, how I saw my role in a lot of this was, how do I make it easy for RSOs to not just exist, but really to thrive during this time, whatever that means to them. Thriving is obviously going to shift from organization to organization depending on their purpose and their programmatic offerings. But how do I support them and motivate them and let them know that SLD is here for them, so that they can carry on with the good work that they are very used to doing in person, like many, if not all, of our RSOs across all institutions participating in this summit could probably identify with. So these are the 3 outcomes that we developed in thinking about this campaign and all of its different facets. And I will say, no matter where your head is at with thinking about spring, I will say that starting with these outcomes, especially for me, in doing all that research and feeling a little bit of decision fatigue with, okay, where do we go? Having these outcomes, although somewhat tedious in sometimes setting them, making sure that they're worded really specifically, having them was so helpful, because essentially I would hear of different ideas and think of different ideas. And for me, if it didn't tie in with one or more of these outcomes, we didn't include it. And that really allowed us to develop a campaign that was not only targeted, but really meaningful. So probably, if I have any piece of advice, it's start with your outcomes. So next, I'm going to go a little bit more into everything that we did. And just so you all know, I do have a little break for us scheduled after this, because I recognize that an hour is a really long time to sit. I don't recommend that to my students, so I built that in. That's going to follow right after I outline all of these different initiatives. And just so you all know, how I've organized this is kind of going from macro to micro level. So what are some of those things way at the top, and then what are some of those one-on-one interactions? So that's just kind of the flow of things in the next couple of slides. So, pardon me, technical thing. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why that content on the right is doing that wonky thing, but that's okay. So the first piece, that the true macro level piece, was what we called the Get Involved at LMU website. This is an evergreen website. It's up right now. You can search it. If you just search LMU SLD, it will bring you here. And what this with this site, and I don't have a screenshot of this, but what this site is essentially a series of RSO promotional videos that the RSOs made themselves. So this wasn't a requirement that an RSO needed to submit, but we have, I want to say, like around 70. So I wish that we had given them more time. And this is something that we are going to be re-promoting for the spring. But we said, if you have a promotional video, we would love to put it on the site. It links to YouTube. So if people want to leave comments, the student org officers can engage with them there. They can also like track their views that way too. And how we organize it here on our site is all by organization category. So you can see them kind of outlined there. If you go onto the website, you can click around and see what's there, but we do have representation over almost all of our different organization categories. And I have to give credit where credit's due. This is an idea that we pulled from UC Riverside. They've done it really, really, really well. And a lot of our RSOs were excited by this idea, latched onto this idea, and really created some really creative videos that there's absolutely no way that I could have done. So that's the most macro. And like I said, this is available now. So feel free to go in and click around. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to start updating it with spring videos. So the next piece that we did, just to kind of, again, take it from the most macro to one step in, were what we called the virtual Get Involved fairs. So we use Engage, and this is a new feature, as I'm sure most, if not all of us are aware, that was developed over the summer. What we did with these fairs is we developed a whole series, and how we had it scheduled was to occur not only the week before classes started, but also after virtual orientation. So virtual orientation wrapped up the Friday before August 24th. I forget the exact date, May 21st, I think it would have been. So they had that whole virtual orientation. Every day they had a different student affairs session. They had a different, like I said, different session each day during virtual orientation that was hosted by a different student affairs department. My department had the luxury of going last. And so we were able to plug, hey, let's talk about involvement. Let's talk about what this means, not only you, but how you can do this virtually and do it well virtually. And that's where the virtual Get Involved fairs came in. So and it worked really well in that the new students and transfer students weren't busy with orientation, but they also hadn't started class. This worked so well that we're actually going to be doing a similar fair to this during the first week of classes in January. So what this screenshot is of a news post that we had on our Engage site. We also did a ton of social media stuff. And as well as we put it in like our student newsletters, LMU This Week. And then there's also a fair amount of word of mouth marketing that I'll go over in a couple slides. But as this news post indicates, these fairs occurred Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from 2 to 4. So we kept that stagnant schedule, which not only made things really easy for us as the event planners and also the student leaders, but I think also the students, like they knew every day, the new students, I mean, every day if they logged in at 2 p.m., they were going to get a different sampling. And we actually had a fair amount of RSOs that participated in two of the fairs. I think we may have had like one or two that did three, and kudos to them, but we did have some organizations that kind of fit two different categories, and they opted in to do two fairs, which was really wonderful. Overall, these fairs went far. They greatly exceeded my expectations. With this being something that was new, and myself being new to virtual programming and virtual affairs, I'll admit I was a little nervous. I was a little nervous about how these were going to go, and if it was going to be beneficial for not only the new students that were attending and seeking community, but also the student org officers that are concerned with building their communities. And they worked really well. I could probably speak at too much length about things I learned and best practices and things that I wish I had known previous to the fair. So if you have specific questions about these fairs, please let me know. Like I mentioned earlier, my email is going to be at the is included at the end, but I'm also doing a live Q&A. So so if that interests you, let's definitely let's chat either over Zoom or phone or email or what have you. So So yeah, those are the fairs. And something that we did try is we tried building a couple of like programmatic fun activities into the help desk, and those didn't really pan out like how we expected them to. That truly was used as a help desk. Hey, I have questions. Is this organization going to be there? We had a couple of student org officers that were having some like Zoom link issues, so they utilized that link as well. I definitely recommend doing a help desk, but for us, it kind of seemed like it really was just that, a help desk where a student would come in, ask a question, and once they got their answer or the issue was resolved, they would then go along, which was good too. Um, what I'll also say, something that we pushed, I think that we pushed was new students RSVPing for the fairs. And what we found every day was the amount of students that were actually attending didn't RSVP ahead of time. So if that's a concern for you, if your RSVP numbers are lower than you anticipated, or maybe what you're wanting, know that all 5 days we had more students actually attend than RSVP. So all good things. The next level of this campaign that we did was actually really in the hands of our RSO officers. This was required, so the fairs weren't required, and submitting a video wasn't required. It was strongly encouraged, and I will say that um, I was very satisfied with our participation numbers, but this was truly the one required piece of this campaign. And we called these the student organization spotlights. Essentially, what these were info sessions, but we didn't want RSOs to feel like they had to call them info sessions. And all RSOs had to host one. So the vast majority of our RSOs do have some type of info session during the first couple weeks of school, but we required this as a way to catch those organizations that maybe weren't. The format, the platform, the length of the spotlight was entirely up to the RSOs. We required the only two things that, or I guess we required three things of each spotlight. One, that it be during the first 3 weeks of the semester. Two, that it be on Leo. And three, that they submit their attendance to Leo afterwards. So that's something that we did. We got a lot of questions about it. There were, I will say, this was, I think, this was the piece of the initiative that required the most troubleshooting, which I didn't really anticipate ahead of time. I think maybe some messaging could have been better, maybe a bit more clear. But all that to say, the numbers were favorable with this. We had almost all of our RSOs completed these spotlights and said and reported that it was worth their while. So, and if you're kind of following along with me here from macro to micro, the goal for us was to create this website where students could just click around and explore, then come to a fair and maybe jump into some of the Zoom rooms and talk briefly, or maybe at length, but at the minimum briefly, with some of the student org officers to learn more about the organization. And then there was the spotlights, where we encouraged the RSO leaders to actually have some, maybe not like a formal presentation, but talking points about what was to come in the fall 2020 semester, create a space where students could ask more questions, have some type of activity. It really varied a lot from RSO to RSO, but really to create that intentional space. Okay, I'm going to go to the Accounting Society's spotlight and I'm going to check them out. I'm going to check out Juggler Unite's spotlight, and I'm going to see what this organization is about. So it really created that that funnel, if you will, from macro to micro, so that new students, transfer students, really all students, but especially transfer students and new first year students, could have that opportunity to filter the type of student organization experience that they were wanting in their fall 2020 semester, which they can hopefully apply to future semesters. So just finding that dedicated community that really excites them. This involvement quiz isn't, in a formal sense, a part of the Get Involved at LMU campaign, but it ran parallel to it. And this initiative has greatly exceeded my expectations. So I would be remiss not to include it in this presentation. This is something that we launched last fall. Previously, last fall 2019, we had a big student involvement fair during orientation. We then had a fair that any RSO could join in September, and then we'd one in October. Last October, after a couple of years of just dwindling numbers, we said, you know what, let's scrap the in-person fair and think of something else that we can do. And that's where the involvement quiz came in. I was inspired by a couple of different institutions. This is a form. We don't call it that, but that is what it is on Leo, on Engage. It is a stagnant resource. This year we completely redesigned it, and I do have a screenshot of some of the quiz questions on the next slide. But like I said, we completely redesigned it for this year. And this is something that is almost entirely helmed by my student involvement team, which is a team of 5 student employees that I oversee. So when a quiz comes in, we have a pretty detailed Excel doc of the submissions that come in, who's going to follow up with who. When they do that follow up, they're first and foremost encouraging that student to schedule a meeting with them. We utilize Calendly, but Microsoft Bookings would work as well. They're encouraging that student to schedule a 15 or 30-minute meeting with them using their Calendly link. And then in that Zoom setting, they're going over their quiz submissions and saying, based on your responses, I recommend A, B, and C organizations. So with that, we're really going for depth over breadth. So instead of recommending like 10 organizations, we're going to recommend like 2 to 4 that you would really like. And here's their social media information, and here's information about upcoming events and meetings that they're hosting, and just kind of providing that in-person consultation. We do those recommendations over email as well, but first and foremost, we're trying to funnel that traffic through the quiz submissions to the Zoom setting, so that it can just be a more meaningful experience than getting another email, as we are all used to always, but especially right now in this virtual setting. We also do some follow-up. So a couple weeks after a student has met over Zoom with one of the involvement specialists, or if those recommendations have been provided via email, there is a follow-up piece there just to check in and see how things are going, if they have connected with any of the recommendations, and to see if there's anything else that we can help with. This has gone, like I said, this has greatly exceeded my expectations. And if you want more information, if you've got questions, I would be happy to speak at any type of length with you about this, because this has been something so great and entirely helmed by students. It's really been phenomenal. So this isn't the whole quiz, but this is a snapshot of some of the questions that we ask. And in my opinion, some of the more interesting questions that we ask, we are looking for what they're wanting out of their involvement. So beyond just to meet people and to get involved, like what is really driving your student involvement? We also ask questions about what their hobbies are. If they could create any RSO, what would it be? We ask about professional aspirations and different things like that. So this is, like I said, this is just a stagnant resource. It's available at any point for a student to do. It's not required by any means. And if you're familiar with Engage and the logic of Engage, you'll notice that very few of these questions are required. We are really just asking students to share with us what they feel comfortable sharing, and we go from there. So there's the involvement quiz, or as I sometimes like to call it, the involvement concierge, because that's what it feels a little bit like, but that's okay. So at this point, we're going to take that break because I've been talking for almost 30 minutes, which is a while. So please take a moment to stand and stretch. I'm going to do the same, and we will resume in about 2 minutes. So if you want to grab some water or a snack, this is that space to do that as well. See you all in a few. 20, 30 more seconds. All right, so that first half was really detailing all of the ways that we were engaging and are engaging with first year students, first time students, and transfer students. The next couple of slides, I'm going to go over some things that that kind of cover the other side of the house with the student org leaders. So I'm really excited to talk about these one-on-one meetings because ultimately they were very positive. And I'll admit I was a little nervous about how they were going to go and also how much energy and attention that they were going to require from me, as well as other student affairs staff in the first couple of weeks of the school year. So when we were developing this plan, I really I did and continue to see my role as really like the motivator and the helper behind the scenes. So while, you know, aside from the fairs, I wasn't really like myself, like out of student leadership development, hosting many fixed programs and initiatives. For me, I saw my role as, okay, how can I help the 200 plus RSOs maximize the semester and not just exist, but really thrive based on their usual schedule and what they're wanting to accomplish out of this fall 2020 semester. So a strength and numbers kind of approach with, okay, it's just me and I can only do so much, but I have these 200 RSOs that are all at varying levels of activity. Some of them have been on campus for decades and decades and decades, and for some of them this is their very first semester on campus. And how are we supporting them all? And an idea that I hatched of like I said, I was a little nervous about were these president one-on-one meetings. So I took all 200 RSOs, and I separated some of them out based on some other staff that we have on campus. So we have we call them cluster advisors in SLD, and essentially what these advisors are other staff in student affairs that have advising specific populations of student organizations written into their job description. So within the Center for Service and Action, they work very closely with our service organizations or service societies, as I feel like it's a bit simpler to understand within a conference setting. Sorority and fraternity life, which is a functional area of SLD, they work very closely with all of our sorority and fraternity chapters, which makes sense. Campus recreation, they oversee the daily operations of our club sports. When I took these organizations out, as well as our intercultural organizations that have advisors that they can contact and that are much more involved than I am in their daily operations within ethnic and intercultural services, there were about 125 RSOs left. So like I said, I took those 200 and I said, what other staff can we help? Can we tap and say, hey, you're probably already meeting with your presidents anyway. So here's some questions to facilitate that. If you're not already meeting with your presidents, would you mind doing that? Luckily, they were all planning on doing it anyway. So it was really more just me asking them to check in with them and see how the student org officers were doing, what their plans were for fall, what are some things that maybe SLD can provide them with or help them with, or just get them more information about. And really just to motivate was the name of the game. For those other 125 RSOs, they were all responsible for meeting with me. And this was something that we required for all RSOs along with the spotlights and the online trainings, which I'll detail on a future slide. So Calendly made this really, really, really easy. So if you're thinking you want to do something like this and you're like, I don't want to be responsible for the scheduling, don't. There are tools, free tools out there that you can use to make this easier for you. And for me, my preference was Calendly, which integrates with Outlook. And I think it also integrates with Google and Gmail. But that's neither here nor there. So for the first, gosh, I would say for the 2 weeks leading up to the semester and the first 4 weeks of the semester, I had at least one RSO president meeting every single day. These were pretty brief meetings. The longest one I want to say went 45 minutes. On average, they were about like 17 to 20 minutes. So they weren't very long. And really what it was an opportunity for me to introduce myself, to explain a little bit about SLD, how we can help, and really to check in with the officer, with the president in this case, and see where they were at. Some of our RSOs, they asked if they could bring in other officers like their treasurer, secretary, vice president. I think there was one organization I met with where they brought their whole e-board, which was like a 5 or 6 person e-board, and then me, which it was it kind of like touched my RSO heart. Like, okay, like you're kind of excited by this, like how I am too. Cool. That's really awesome. And I going into these one-on-ones, I was thinking I was going to need to do a lot more of that motivation piece, of that encouragement piece. Okay, let's talk about fall. And here's why you should be excited about fall. And yeah, Zoom fatigue is real. And there are a lot of things going on in the world. And it's very draining to be a human being right now. And there's presidential election. But all that to say, I actually didn't need to do as much motivation and encouragement as I thought I was going to need to do. A lot of these RSOs came into these meetings with questions. A lot of them had a lot of questions about best practices and what I would recommend for shifting their previously in-person experience to a virtual experience. And, like a lot of campuses, a lot of our RSOs transition in new leadership over the summer. And so for me, and I think that's where a little bit of that nervousness came from. For me, it's a lot of these students I've never met with. They've maybe seen my name a couple times in their inbox over the summer, but we have never met, we've never talked, and now we're going to be one-on-one on Zoom. And it really wasn't awkward at all. And I think it's because I went in with questions, with guided questions, to help kind of steer the conversation, because meeting a stranger, whether regardless of if they're a student or not, can sometimes be a little awkward on Zoom. So overall, this is something that went really, really, really well. Yes, did it take a lot of time and energy? Absolutely. But I feel like I actually really got to know all of the RSO presidents that were within that were outside of these categories listed here in a really meaningful way that I hadn't in previous semesters. So I'm trying to think about, okay, in future semesters, not spring, but in future semesters when maybe things are a bit more normal and we're back on campus, how can I mirror this? How can I maybe I do these one-on-ones in person? I'm not sure. I'm still kind of thinking it through, but this was something that was much more impactful and meaningful and ultimately positive than I thought it was going to be. So if you're entertaining the idea of doing that with your RSOs, and you want to walk through some of the logistics, please let me know, because I would be happy to, like I said, provide best practices and recommendations there. We also, we had 2 other RSO requirements. These were entirely facilitated on Leo. First, we had a re-registration process. We did something a bit unconventional this year. We did re-registration in early summer over the month of May, like how we usually do, but we also had one in August. We've never had 2 re-registration processes so close. We usually only do it once a year in, it kind of starts usually in the latter half of April and then completely goes through May. But with the university announcing that everything was going to be virtual, we wanted to facilitate another checkpoint, essentially another touch point, to see what are RSOs thinking, which ones are planning on re-registering and doing things for the coming semester, and which ones are maybe thinking about taking a pause, at least for the spring semester. Within those two processes, we also included a lot of free response questions about how those RSOs are currently doing, or how they usually do officer transitions, and are their advisors involved in that process? What are some of their goals and objectives for the coming year? What are some successes from the 2019-2020 year that they want officially recorded in the SLD archives? And also just what are their plans for fall 2020? What are they thinking? What's an area of concern? Maybe they're using that semester to think more about their social media presence and building followership there. Maybe they really want to make it a big fundraising semester. Maybe they're looking at recruitment. Maybe they're looking at all those things. Let's just check in and see what are some of those common goals and also areas of concerns for our RSOs. And we used that information to facilitate not only, or not to facilitate, we use this information not only to guide our offerings within the Get Involved at LMU campaign, but also we used a lot of that information to guide the content within our online trainings, which I'll go over in a moment, and also things to come later this semester and into the spring. To speak to the online trainings piece, this is now our third year of doing online trainings. Again, these are just a form on Leo. We completely reimagined them for this year. They are now videos that are embedded into an engaged form, and also as the topics would indicate, we revamped the topics as well. So previously there had been 3 online trainings detailing Leo, basic financial management, and then just programming and event planning, which covered a lot of our policies. Based on the information that we got in our 2 re-registration processes, we did a lot of research, institutional research, and also just best practices research, and we put a lot of it within these 4 trainings. We also added a 4th training that's simply called Adapting Your RSO's Operations. So what are maybe some of those things that you haven't had to think of virtually before, and how can we get those wheels turning in a way that's going to make sense for your RSO? These trainings, I mentioned their videos. We used Powtoon, which was a really fantastic resource for us. Powtoon then integrates with YouTube, and we took the YouTube link and we put it into Leo. So there's a couple layers there. I'd be happy to chat offline about our production process, because there were, we were kind of learning as we went. And so I've learned quite a few things about all of those different softwares and how they integrate with one another throughout the process. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please let me know. We required all RSOs to complete all 4. We asked presidents to do all 4, but with some of them, they said, can I delegate this to my treasurer? We said yes in those cases. And we also had a fair amount of RSOs that their presidents did all 4, and they said, can I also have my treasurer or VP finance or equivalent complete as well? And we said, absolutely, the more the merrier. So these online trainings a couple of years ago, we used to facilitate that information in person, but we moved it to online when we realized, this is very transactional, black and white information that students just need to know and have it in a place where they can also refer back to it in the future. And it's really saved not only the professional full-time staff, but also our student staff with a lot of those quick questions, especially for our new RSOs. It's been really helpful in getting them just that very surface level information that they need to logistically run their organization on campus. So shifting gears a little bit to talking about marketing. Marketing. This I'll admit, this was a tough one. At LMU, word of mouth continues to be the most common effective method of communication and marketing, and just getting the word out about different events and things. Word of mouth, I put it in quotations there because although we are not on campus this semester, there is some word of mouth. I feel like I I now occasionally will get Instagram DMs about different events from students saying like, "Hey, I saw this and I thought of you," or "Hey, I have a question about this. Like, who should I reach out to?" So these were previously things that they would ask me in person, and now we're all just electronically communicating more as people, and that goes for student, staff, and faculty. Um, this screenshot, this is our LMU SLD Instagram. We've kind of had this on the back burner for the last couple of semesters, and we finally said, you know what, this is the semester that we're going to do it. It is entirely run by a student staff. There's a team of 3. There are student support specialists. They have a 3-point engagement plan. Every day, I mean, they repost things like crazy on their story, but they have a whole editorial calendar that I'd be happy to share if you would like to take a look at it. And it's a 3-point plan that there's an RSO spotlight. There is there's like I forget, I think it's called a carousel of events that are occurring that week. And then they also do the occasional line leader spotlight. So it's fun. It's very LMU themed. But this is something that's been really good for us, and we're just trying to invest our resources into building that followership. So I feel like most departments have an Instagram, but if your department doesn't, and you're thinking about doing it, and you just want to know what that's like, and how Instagram algorithms are changing and just best practices, let me know, because we just went through this, and I would be happy to talk more. Happy to talk more about that offline via email or Zoom or what have you. We also did a fair amount of marketing through the LMU This Week newsletters. So we have a student edition as well as a staff and faculty edition that goes out every other week, but we also do express editions. So every week there's, in like the off weeks, there is a shorter express version that'll maybe have like 1 or 2 things on it. The newsletters was critical for sharing not only the Get Involved website with all the different promotional videos, but also the involvement quiz. We have been able to track when those come out and an uptick of views and submissions, and we've it's either working, and people are reading those newsletters, or it's just a crazy coincidence. We also do a lot on Leo. So I was joking with some staff earlier in the semester that after a couple of years of really trying to push people to Leo, I feel like Leo is finally having its moment. RSOs are posting more events there. They're using more of the tools. They're including pictures on their organization page, and they're doing more news posts and things like that. So I feel like between social media and Leo, that's really been where the bulk of our marketing successes have been. But we are constantly trying new things, throwing spaghetti on the wall, and seeing what sticks, because this is brand new, like how it is for so many of us right now. So if you have specific questions about that, I would be happy to chat further offline. I will say, from the RSO perspective, it seems like most of them have been putting a lot more time and resources into social media marketing and marketing their various programs and initiatives on Leo, and it that seems to be they seem to be getting a good return on their investment there. So it's not just for departments. It also seems that for student orgs, that's working as well. So assessment. So this is something that's like literally currently underway. We are planning on facilitating a formal assessment and feedback process for our RSO leaders. It's set to launch. We're on target to launch something by the time that this will air on Friday, December 11th. So, so my language here on the slide is it's a bit aspirational, but we're working on the survey right now. Ideally we're going to launch it the week before the Student Organization Summit. So far, and again, this has been word of mouth. I don't have numbers and charts and official means of assessment, but so far, what we've done, all the different little facets have come together in a really nice dare I say, synergistic way. We have also rerouted some of our processes so that RSOs, instead of coming to a front desk, have to actually contact a staff member, which, although it creates on the back end more emails and more tasky things to do, it gets us really good FaceTime to not only check in with our student organizations and how they're doing as an organization, how like their general health is, but also to check in with our students. And I don't think this isn't new information, but our students right now are struggling. This time is tough for all of us, regardless of our university classification. And so um, I've really enjoyed all of those, random, hey, can we just like hop on a Zoom and chat about this real quick, because it allows us to capture some of that interaction and that students to staff touch point that we would in person normally on campus. I also have virtual office hours on Zoom, so that's something that I'd done in previous years in person, and now it's on Zoom. It's the same days and times as it was in person. So for our returning student leaders, I feel like that's been really impactful. So because sometimes they just have a quick question, and it's easier to hop on Zoom than it is to ask an email, which is my preference as well. So the more that you can replicate that, the better, even if it means just kind of sitting on Zoom for a couple hours every week and waiting to see if someone is going to pop in. We do have a feedback form for the students that complete the involvement quiz and meet via Zoom with one of our student involvement specialists. And so far, that feedback has been positive. So if you would like to see more specific numbers, or are curious as to how we facilitate that, market that, train our student involvement specialists to become well versed in not just student organizations, but LMU involvement in general, please let me know. But so far things are looking good. As we look ahead, and this is me speaking for SLD staff, as we look ahead, here's what we're looking to do in the spring 2021 semester. I don't think I mentioned this at the start, but with LMU being in LA County, I want to say that all LA County schools right now are virtual in some form or fashion, and we don't anticipate that changing for the spring 2021 semester. So this is what we're planning on doing as of late November, early December 2020. We'll see what happens. That's kind of been the whole MO this year, but this is where we're at right now. This is our thought process. What has worked really well? The virtual fairs, the involvement quiz, the promotional videos, and having them on an evergreen site, the president one-on-ones, and also the online trainings. I've spoken about each of those individually and have indicated that they've been successful, so I won't go into any more detail on this slide about those. Leaving behind the student organization spotlights. And what I mean by leaving behind is we will still encourage this, but I want to say, for the most part, the student org officers that I met with said, yeah, this was worth our while, but I think we need to retool it. We need to rename it. We need to think about how we're going to market it. It led to a lot of questions, and then really dishearteningly, we had a lot of student, or maybe not a lot, but we had a good handful of student organizations that said, yeah, we did this and we had a whole thing prepared, but only 3 students showed up. So, and I don't know if that was just Zoom fatigue, the start of the semester fatigue, trying to figure it all out fatigue, but it needs to be retooled. We will most likely retool it for the fall 2021 semester, come what may, with virtual, in person. If that's going to be split, we will see. So we're not totally going to leave it behind, but it really needs to be re-envisioned a bit. Some new initiatives that we're working on for the spring that I'm really excited about include our student involvement specialist office hours. So I have office hours for all the RSO leaders, but we are going to be hosting at least 1 hour Monday through Friday, a Zoom room. Again, all of this will still be virtual. A Zoom room for any student, be it new or returning, to pop in and ask a student involvement specialist about involvement. Maybe they want to know about RA selection. Maybe they want to know about sorority and fraternity recruitment. Maybe they want to know about our business fraternities or our a cappella groups. Really, whatever it is, they can just pop into that space and actually ask a involved student more specific information. The student involvement specialist team, they do have an inbox where they receive these inquiries from time to time, but we feel like by providing that in-person touch point, that it will be more successful. So we will see. We're also going to be doing more collaboration with other departments. So right now, a lot of this collaboration has been with departments in the Division of Student Affairs that heavily advise and work alongside in the daily operations of our RSOs. But we are really looking forward to connecting with first year experience, student success, possibly the dean's office, just to see, okay, what are some things that you're doing, what are some things that we're doing, and how can we triangulate our efforts to create a really rich portfolio. We're also going to be including more of our staff and faculty advisors that are advising in addition to their professional capacities on campus, be it staff or faculty. We are also, and this kind of speaks to an earlier slide, we are in the process of developing a suite. I think we have like 6 resource guides. They're PDFs, they're downloadable, that are specifically tailored to student organization officers based on what they want to know more information about. So we have one that walks them through how to download their Zoom attendance to then upload it to Leo. We have one we've got one about virtual fundraising. We have one about social media and building followership and how to really use social media as a way to not only advertise, but also just to build engagement and have that be a passive programming touch point. So all of those guides were developed using the feedback that we received in our re-registration processes. So really it's us taking that information and saying, okay, you have these questions, here's the information, and how can we continue to help? So those are some of the new things that we're working on for next semester. Thank you so much. I recognize that we are very quickly coming up to the 60-minute mark. So thank you so much for your time, because I know that this is one of the longer presentations. If you are tuning into this live, please, if you've got questions, if you want to talk about this further, I would love to chat with you. So navigate back to if you navigate back to the summit website, there'll be a Zoom link so we can chat further. If you're watching this later, or if you're not able to go to the Q&A, or for whatever reason, please feel free to email me. There's my email address. I would absolutely love to continue the conversation. If you have information that you think could be helpful for me, if you think I have information that'd be helpful for you, please let me know, because this work is it's good, but it's challenging, and it at times / a lot of the time feels like we're trying to hit a moving target. So we're all in this together. If there's any way that I can be a resource to you, please do not hesitate to reach out. And I hope that we talk soon. Thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for tuning in to the Student Organization Summit. If you're watching this live, feel free to reference the schedule for the day and use the link in the schedule to access a Q&A room where you can ask questions or chat with the presenters from this workshop. If they didn't list a Q&A link, or you're watching this video after the event, thank you for your interest in the Student Organization Summit.